Hey everybody, long time no see. We are back here, and today I was thinking that we would do something a little bit different. We're going to do two things. First, we're going to drink some kind of, I don't want to call them underdog teas because they're not really underdogs, but they're underappreciated teas, I think. Given the vast catalog that we've put together for the Yunnan Sourcing brand Pu-erh teas over the years, now we're getting up into the, I don't know, two to 300 different teas that we've produced under the Yunnan Sourcing brand. There's obviously going to be some ones that have, I think, fallen through the cracks, and in the sense that I think that they just haven't really come to the forefront. I think when I started back in 2009, it wasn't until about 2014, 2015 that people really started to kind of really recognize and understand and appreciate the Yunnan Sourcing brand of pu'er. Of course, there were always some early adherents to the brand, but I wanted to bring on two cakes that are both from 2013 autumn, which would make them exactly, almost exactly 5 years old now. And I wanted to drink them side by side. The two cakes are the 2013 autumn Boulang. So you can recognize the autumn Yunnan Sourcing brand Sheng pu'ers by this wrapper here, which was done by a Ukrainian customer, and they're just really cool. It's all hand drawn. This is Boulang, and this is the one in the front. And then Ibang, which is small leaf varietal, mixed, they say Zhom Xie Zhom varietal in Ibang, which is in the Yiwu area. So we've got two Sichuan teas from autumn 2013, one from Yiwu and one from Monghai or Boulang. Boulang is in Monghai area of Sichuan, whereas Yiwu is in the far east of Sichuan. Monghai is in the west. So we're going to drink them side by side. I'm just going to talk about them a little bit. And then I also wanted to, I don't know if I've done this before, but this is one of the ways that I like to drink teas and evaluate teas. Which I'll show you in a second. Basically, you've got a 60 milliliter gaiwan here. You've got roughly 60 milliliter cups here. These are the ribbed Jingdezhen porcelain cups, which are nice and heavy in the hand. I really like these cups a lot. But what I'm going to do, you'll see, I'm going to pour into here, and then I'm going to pour into here. And this gives me kind of time, so this one's cooling, and then I can go back to brewing here and then pouring in here. By the time I poured this cup, this is probably cool enough for me to drink. So it's a really efficient way to drink tea if you want to do a bunch of cuppings. If you want to do multiple steeps, you want to do 2 at a time or even 3 at a time. It's really efficient. So yeah, we're going to put the gongfu and gongfu cha here in a second. So, and actually I'm gonna, just to be almost boiled this, I'm going to get it up again just to make sure. As you know, hot water is really, really important for pu'er. But again, this is the Boulang and this is the Ibang. So, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how these are coming along at 5 years of age now. These have been pretty dry stored. I think they've pretty much been only in Bend, Oregon, and Texas. So, but if you purchase them from YunnanSourcing.us, they'll be shipped from Bend, Oregon. If you purchase them from YunnanSourcing.com, they would be shipped from Kunming. So the storage conditions vary somewhat, but both storage conditions I would consider to be dry storage conditions. So let's get started. Now, of course, even if you're only doing 60 milliliters, if you do a bunch of infusions, you're still going to get a good amount of caffeine, and you're still going to get a good amount of tea drunk. But it's a lot better than using a gaiwan like this. If you're going to go solo and you use a gaiwan like this, you're not going to be able to drink as many different teas, and it's going to be harder to do like it's like a, you know, side by side like I'm doing now. And I don't deal with the strainer. I just try to keep the gap small as I can, so I don't lose too much. And of course, as the leaves open up, that they tend to not fall out. There's a little bit of stuff in the cup here, but I'm just gonna do this as a wash. You know, just get these cups primed and ready. You can smell them. Already smell a little bit of difference. This one's Bulong has that, I call it like a sweaty horse kind of. I don't know how to describe it. It's aromatic, but it's also, there's a little bit of, it can be a little bit of like acrid, I don't know, funk in some Bulong teas. The Yiwu is definitely, I think, the more pleasant smelling of the teas. Bulong is interesting. It's always kind of, you know, bitter. Can be quite bitter. So, anyways, I don't want to steep these too long. Nice. It's kind of hard to see, but there's kind of like a golden, kind of tending towards orange tea soup for the Bulong. And yeah, the Yiwu was pretty much the same. So, you know, 5 years of age. There's a little bit of like a tobacco kind of smell with the Bulong. I don't want to say smoke because I don't think it's smokiness. I think some people sometimes they think that the tobacco is smoke, and it's not. There's a real difference between, like, smoke is like because there's smoke in it. The Yiwu is just very, very sweet, and it's got a real sweet kind of thickness to it. And the Bulong does as well. So the aroma is very excellent on these. And again, I'm going to pour these into the cups here, and then that's where the not needing a strainer can come in really well, because the little stuff, the little bits and stuff, you can just leave on the bottom and then dump out. So, but again, with this, if you're trying to get through something fast, and I do this a lot when I have a lot of teas to get through and drink, but I want to brew them Gong Fu style, because I'm not much doing it like the competition cupping where you put a little bit in and you have the spoon and you let it sit there. I'm just not a fan of that, because that's not how I drink teas. I prefer to brew teas how I drink them, to evaluate them. So again, I'm going to start here, but I'm also going to pay attention to these. I don't want to oversteep these. Wow. Strong, bitter. There is just like, I think, the hint of smoke in this. And then I'm going to pour this in here. I'm going to do this here as well. I'm going to pour this one in because I don't want to let these over steep, especially in these early steepings. So, okay. I'm going to take the lid off. When you're brewing teas, it's good not to let them just sit in the steam. It's good to let them open up a little bit in between steepings, especially if you're going to let them sit for a little while. So I'm going to go back here. I've got these lined up. When I'm done with these, I'm going to put the water in these and start drinking these. So again, this is the first steep after the wash. Interesting. The Yibang actually is coming out stronger than I had thought, especially the way that it smelled. The Yibang is actually coming out really quite bitter as well. There's a little bit more of a grassiness to it, whereas the Bulong, there's like a kind of a heavier, kind of thick aspect to it. Let me go back here. Wow, that second steeping is strong. Lot of bitterness coming through. I'm gonna go ahead and if you don't want to pour these, like I could have poured this second infusion in here to make room here, but I can just do this too, you know. Sometimes pouring it again will cool it down faster if you want to do that by just, you know, pouring it into the cup over here and having this always be your drinking cups. That way, you know, you pour it in here and then you pour it in there. This kind of simulates cha hai. So, although it's not a fair picture because it's, you know, it's just you don't have to be fair. Wow. I remember when this tea was young, it was, I don't want to say undrinkable, but it wasn't something that I would drink. And I haven't touched this tea for probably, I'd say a couple of years, and I'm really pleasantly surprised by it. It's got a lot of power, but that harshness is gradually being replaced by this complexity, this thick kind of viscous, you know, mouthfeel. But Bulong in general, and I think this one also has that. It has a bitterness that stays. So unlike a hyper expensive Lao Banjiang or something like that, where the bitterness hits you and then it immediately just turns into sweetness, hui gan, which in Chinese is like the return of returning feeling, or hui tian, coming back as sweet. This definitely has a bitterness that hangs out there. There's sweetness too, but the bitterness is hanging out there too. I'm gonna go ahead and so, I mean, that's the thing. When you're doing this method, it might not be the most relaxing. You have to be mindful because you're drinking the tea, but you're also brewing the tea, right? So it's not drink the tea, brew the tea, drink the tea, brew the tea. It's drink the tea, oh, brew the tea, back to drinking. So, you know, you may or may not want to do this. If you simply just have one tea that you're brewing, it can work really well. And in the later steeps, it can work well because you have longer times to work with when you're steeping it to drink the tea. But in the beginning, you really got to pay attention. Nice sweetness there. And a real strong mouthfeel. Hey, Lucy. Where are you going? So the Yibang, bitter, but a little more balanced. It's not quite as, that bitterness doesn't remain nearly as long in the mouth. And of course, I think on the next steep, I'm going to try switching it. So instead of drinking the Bulong first, I'm going to drink the Yibang first, just to make sure that I'm not being too overly influenced by the other tea. And of course, that's partially unavoidable when you're doing two teas like this. You know, when it's in your mouth, you're feeling it, but then you drink the next one, it's like, oh, well, that bitterness is really there. And it's like, oh, did that come from the Bulong? So, you know, I'm actually going to pour these in here. Pour this little choppy little things. Jiao pian, as they say in Chinese. And I'm going to hit this up again. And again, these are not ancient arbor teas, either of these, you know. They're just good, solid examples. And actually 2013 autumn was the first, sheng pu'ers that we were testing. So these both passed 26 pesticide profile test, which, you know, at the time was what we started out testing for. So, but they're nice. You know, I feel confident that they're good, clean teas. So I'm going to drink the Ibang first this time. If you can see this tea soup here, it's probably a little bit hard to see, but it's a nice ruddy kind of it's a real orange color, tending towards a little bit of redness. So, wow. I think I'm over steeping these because this is a little bit strong. So this method, it's tricky. If you're not careful, you'll end up over steeping them. I don't know how to describe that Bouillon taste, and it's in a really awkward stage right now, being just 5 years old. It's got a lot of that bitterness, and it has this complexity, and it has this kind of like, I can't even begin to describe it, actually. It's so unique to Bouillon tea. The aroma is really nice on these. The Iwu definitely wins for the aroma, the Ibang. So I'm going to pour this out. Pour this in here. This in here. Get another. So again, this is a way, if you want to steep two teas, you want to do them side by side, you're doing it solo, I highly recommend this method. All it takes is these little 60 milliliter gaiwans, which are a few bucks, and 2 cups. They don't have to be these kind of fancier cups like we have here. They can be any cups, just as long as they're big enough to hold the contents from the gaiwan. So 50 milliliters typically. You figure a good amount of the water is being displaced by the tea. So these teas are still going strong. I feel like this Bouillon tea is it's very much an aging tea. It's heavy, it's thick, it's tanniny, it's complex, it's got sweetness, it's got a lot of things going on. It's bitter. I think this tea is a tea for aging. And given the current price of a lot of Bouillon teas, I think that this is priced fairly reasonably as well. So let's try the Ibang. The Ibang tea is more of I don't want to say a drink it now tea because it's still quite strong. But being an Iwu tea and being from Ibang, I think that it's definitely more of a tea that you would want to drink now compared to the Bouillon. And again, I feel like I've probably, I don't know, maybe I put too much. I put 4.5 grams in here. I probably could have done 4. These teas are really strong today. I don't know if it's just me but both of these. I mean, if I had used a larger gaiwan to cup these, I would have a hard time keeping the conversation going at all. I'd just be kind of staring at the camera in a stupor, which I'm actually getting close right now to getting to that point. But I don't know how many steeps we've gone, but you can see why this method is really useful, because you can go through 2 teas pretty quick. I use the same method when I'm doing Mao Cha, and I like to also, when I get Mao Cha, so like fresh sheng pu'er before it's been pressed, when I get samples, I like to drink them blind. So what I'll do is I'll put the bags, and usually the bags have all been put in the same kind of silver pouches, and I take them facing away, and let's say I have 6 samples. I'll do 2 at a time. I'll take 2, put them there. I'll put the bags over here and the facing away from me, so I don't know what they are. I don't know the cost. And I'll drink them and take notes or make any kind of notes I need, and then I'll do the next 2. And at the end of it, I'll look. But we're so biased by where we're getting the tea from, who grew it, or what area it's from, or the price, and all that kind of thing. So, blind tasting is also really useful, and I think I've talked about this in other videos as well. We just started a blind tasting tea set sampler, which we're going to do. We're going to put out a new one each month, and we'll keep them online as long as we can. It's not a tea club because the prices of each one will vary according to which teas we put in it. But this first month, September, we put out a black tea blind tasting sampler, so you can buy that. You get 5 different teas, and I think it's just $25. But you get 5 different teas, black teas, and I think it's 25 grams of each, so it's not a small amount. And you can drink through them. They're just labeled A, B, C, D, E. And when you're done, on the listing, there's a PDF that you can download, which is the key, so you can check it out. And then, you can drink the teas and make your notes, and really just kind of divorce yourself from, the description of the teas and where the teas are from and the cost of the teas, because I think as much as we, maybe we try or maybe we don't, as much as we try to mediate our, bias, through self-control and things like that. I think that we are biased, and our brain is always trying to, impose order on things or impose some kind of rationale. So, wow, this Oolong is going strong. Again, I think very much a tea for aging. I can imagine the spring version of this. I didn't make Mao Cha from the spring version from this area, but wow. I've got these sitting here too. So as you can tell, this kind of brewing method really requires a certain level of mindfulness. Of course, it's helpful if you're just sitting and if you're solo and you're not really, talking, you're not filming, you might have, kind of better luck paying attention to the timing and everything. So, and again, I'm just pouring out the little bits that fall at the bottom. That's why also having this other intermediary cup here is useful. Let's give these one more drink, and then we'll conclude the video. But yeah, there's a real kind of fruity, grassy sweetness to this Ebong tea. It's a very pleasant. I think if I were to do it again, I wouldn't have used 4.5 grams. Honestly, both of these are so strong. I could have used 3.5 or 4 grams, and I probably would have kept the steeping time shorter. But again, that kind of goes back to having a relationship with the teas. And, so maybe tomorrow I'll brew these teas again, and I'll totally hit their sweet spot. Because if I do it today or fairly recently, and I haven't brewed the teas for a while, sometimes I won't quite get it. So that's the other thing to keep in mind, that when you're brewing the teas, pay attention and adjust. You can adjust during your session, of course, but then, if you do another session with the same tea, I think that really helps, because then you can really kind of like dial it in, hone in on how to best brew the tea to make it the way that you want it to be. Whether you're evaluating or whether you're just drinking it for pleasure, whether there's no right way per se. The tea can come out in so many different ways, and I think that's something that a lot of times when people have problems with the teas, and I'm like, well, I feel good about that tea, I feel confident about that tea, and then the conversation continues with the customer or whatever, and sometimes they're not really like, they're not brewing the teas in the right way, so or they haven't really given the tea a chance. Maybe they've done one session with it, so I always recommend that people do multiple sessions with the tea if they really want to get to know it. Now I'm tasting it. there's almost like an incense-like character to this tea. And I think this is what often the Chinese refer to as jianxiang. We used to sell a 2000 CNMP Jianxiang Bulang, which was an amazing tea and had that character. It's the incense, almost incense-like character and flower. And it's coming out in this Bulang now. It's weird because it didn't happen until this steep. The other thing about teas that I find really interesting, ripe and raw pu'ers, is that the later steeps can sometimes give you a little bit of a window into what it's going to be like when it's older. So those early steeps, the bitter, the astringent, all that stuff can kind of overpower the mouth. And then the later steeps, it's like, well, now there's something else there. Not to say that it's exactly the same, but there's a little bit of I think that this tea is giving me a little bit of a peek into its future here in this later steepings, which I think is fascinating. And I didn't really get that in the earlier steepings. If I had started out maybe using less tea, a little bit of shorter steepings, and kind of gradually drawn out what this tea has to offer, I would have noticed that in an earlier steep. But I'm noticing it now, so I'm gonna and that's really interesting. And I think, one of the reasons that Bulang teas, like teas, Lao Banjiang and Bulang area teas have this popularity is because they have a very interesting way of aging. And I think it's kind of become, I don't know if people accept it, but it's kind of become like the classical kind of like idea about pu'er. Really, Sichuan Bana teas in general have become kind of like the, kind of the classic pu'er, as it were. Not to say that teas from other areas aren't good or as good, but just the focus of a lot of the attention on pu'er has been in Sichuan Bana. And certainly it's well deserved. I think as time passes, we're going to see less of a focus, or not less of a focus necessarily on teas from Sichuan Bana, but more of a focus on teas from other areas. And already places like Bingdao in Mengku and Linzang have become, and Xigui, and some other areas have become very well known. And Yiwu, of course, which is, not Monghai and not Bulang. But yeah, it's really interesting because I think as time passes and people's awareness, and not just outside of China, but within China, and when I started, it was all about Monghai and Yiwu, and there was very little going on and very little known. I mean, I remember Bingdao, people saying Bingdao, and I didn't know what Bingdao was. I mean, people didn't talk about Bingdao until probably about 2006 or 2007, and then suddenly Bingdao is, so. I think the moral of the story is that there's a lot of good tea out there, and the tea that's good and sought after, is sought after because of its reputation. The real issue sometimes is does the price still come into something that's reasonable and worthwhile given the level of quality? But that's not for me to decide. So we're going to drink this Bulang again. So interesting. It's got, again, the perfume, incense, jianxiang thing going on. There's a sweetness. The bitterness has faded just enough. I think the bitterness in the earlier steepings is really kind of blocking that this more subtle character to it. So, and I am sweating from both of these teas. These are both powerful, powerful teas. So, and they're autumn too. So, typically autumn teas are less potent than spring teas. But I do remember that the 2013 autumn teas in general were very potent. Drinking Yibang. Sweet, grassy, fruity, very pleasant, and still, these teas still have a lot to offer. But I'm going to conclude the video now. I do highly recommend that you check these out. They're good teas. And I think that both of them are aging wonderfully and definitely worth, if you're at all interested, definitely worth picking up a sample of. So thanks for watching, and see you next time.